Who exactly is Kenny ACKERMAN? So what's up guys, Foxen here. Let's go ahead and talk about Kenny the Ripper, as Levi called him. The first trailer for Attack on Titan Season 3 highlighted Kenny and revealed him to be an ACKERMAN. But who exactly is Kenny? Is he really stronger than the great Captain Levi? Let's go ahead and get into every juicy detail behind Kenny. First off, what is that main thing that defines Kenny ACKERMAN? For Kenny, that would actually be living his life trying to achieve his ultimate dream. But what exactly is Kenny's grand dream? To both find out and understand what this is, you have to look into Kenny's past. The earliest you actually see of Kenny was when he was actually already in his 30s. In this flashback, Kenny was at his dying grandfather's bedside. At this point, Kenny the Ripper was in his prime. Kenny had actually just killed another military police guy before visiting his grandfather. At this point, you actually learn a little bit more about the ACKERMAN family. On his deathbed, Kenny's grandfather was actually debating about whether to tell Kenny the truth or instead take the secret with him to the grave. Eventually, he decided on giving Kenny the burden. This was something that Kenny was curious about anyway. From what Kenny heard, the ACKERMAN actually used to be this warrior family close to the crown. This is why Kenny was wondering what the hell happened. For the longest time, Kenny's family, which is the ACKERMAN family, had this long history of persecution within the walls. Why was the whole world against them? In his final few moments, the grandfather spilled everything. According to him, the monarchs in place didn't hate the ACKERMAN, but feared them. This was because the ACKERMAN could not be controlled by them. Previously in the past, the ACKERMAN family actually functioned as the government's sword and shield. This is now getting into the deeper secrets of the king and the walls. The king, or the founding titan holder, actually had the power to rewrite the memories of the main race within the walls. However, within the walls, you also had some minority groups. This included Asians and the ACKERMAN family. Minority groups like the ACKERMAN were actually unaffected by the king's power. Ultimately, the king wanted to keep the people inside the walls ignorant and achieve his dream of this perfect, peaceful utopia. In the way of achieving this dream stood these minority groups. I guess the king was merciful not to just kill them all. Instead, the king resorted to other methods to keep these groups quiet. Most of these minority groups submitted to the king's demands, except two. Those two were the ACKERMAN family and the Asian clan. Both of these turned their back to the king and hence were persecuted. Over the years, parents of these groups didn't tell their kids about the history to avoid these possible issues. The head of the ACKERMAN family eventually offered his own life in exchange for the survival of the rest of the ACKERMAN. However, his sacrifice didn't end up doing too much. Now, Kenny finding out about this story was a major turning point in his life. Kenny was greatly influenced by this whole Titan King tale. He chose to completely buy it, and then his dream evolved from here. Kenny wanted to someday get this power for himself. Unfortunately for Kenny, things didn't go exactly as planned, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Fast forward a few years later, Kenny actually managed to find the real king within the walls. This also actually turned into Kenny's first encounter with the Titan, which is Uri's Titan. He couldn't believe that there was someone stronger in the world than him. At this point, Kenny felt that only violence existed as his defining characteristic. It is true that Kenny went after the true king, but Kenny didn't really feel like it was due to a family grudge that he held. Either way, for the first time, Kenny felt helpless for once in his life. However, to Kenny's surprise, this godlike being that could crush him in a second actually bowed to him. Uri pleaded for forgiveness for what the ACKERMAN family had to endure throughout the decades, which of course was all that persecution. All the events leading up to this here were another defining moment for Kenny. It triggered this jolt inside of him. Kenny chose to accept this apology and even offered to help him. The god being Titan agreed. Fast forward some time later, Kenny now became part of the assembly, which officially made him part of the higher-ups in the royal government. At this time, the persecution against the ACKERMAN stopped. Kenny all of a sudden felt like he had almost no people going after his ass. At this moment, Kenny had almost free reign to practically do anything he wanted and get away with it. At this time, Kenny set out to visit his sister ACKERMAN in the underground. Kucho was her name, and she was working as a prostitute. Unfortunately, when Kenny found her, she had already passed away due to some illness. Right next to her deathbed remained her kid. This was how Kenny met Levi. This right here was another important moment in Kenny's life. Uncle Kenny took little Levi in. Kenny wasn't scum enough just to leave a little kid behind, although he sure as hell didn't think of himself as father material. This is why Kenny fell back on the only thing he knew. He taught Levi everything about fighting and killing. This also included how to drink some and how to shank people really well. Kenny made sure to teach Levi everything he knew. This way, Levi was able to survive underground. Perhaps as a test, it was then up to Levi to make it to the surface on his own from there. From this point on, Kenny reflected and wondered why exactly he chose to help and follow Uri. He was still unsure of it himself. Kenny thought perhaps it was since this Titan being was the strongest guy around, since being the most important person in the world means that you're the most powerful one in it, and power was everything to Kenny, or so he thought. Pretty soon after this realization, he let go of Levi. Levi was once again left alone, left underground to survive. Eventually, Kenny actually learned that this Titan power could be passed down. This only made Kenny more interested in getting this Titan power. Although do notice that Kenny didn't necessarily want it to become stronger or more powerful. It almost seemed like Kenny was still lost and remained unsure of what he was seeking even in his late 40s. After the royal blood daughter inherited the Titan's power, Kenny's wondering continued. How could this all-powerful being speak of love and peace among mankind? Was it having this almighty power that provided one so much freedom? Could even someone like Kenny become like that with that power? Kenny just continued to wonder. Soon after, Kenny became the captain of the anti-personnel squad. On paper, this group was created to go against the Survey Corps. However, in reality, they existed to fulfill Kenny's grand dream. Kenny wanted to obtain that godlike power for himself one day. For some reason, those that got their hands on this power seemed to turn compassionate. Kenny wondered if even a piece of shit like him could turn out to be the same. What would it feel like to become this god on top of the world? Would trash like him even be able to see the same thing? From here on, Kenny remained very loyal to the Reyes family. As for Kenny's connection with Historia, shortly after the Walmaria gates fell, the head of the royal family, Rod, rushed over to meet Historia. Up until this point, Kenny was extremely loyal to this family. Kenny himself seemed pretty close to Rod, even offering personal advice. Kenny eventually ended up killing Historia's mother after Rod denied any connection to her. Historia, however, was spared at the last moment by her father. It wouldn't be years later until Kenny met Historia again. Now we're at the present events of the Uprising arc. Kenny's mission was to take his squad and capture Eren and Historia. This would also be the first time that Kenny met up with Levi once again. In their brief battle interaction, Kenny mentioned about how Levi just wouldn't understand him. Kenny, however, understood why Levi would join the Survey Corps. He saw both of them being very much alike. Both of them grew up in the underground in extreme poverty and filth. They barely survived day to day. After both of them found out just how big this world really was, it hurt them, which was the realization of finding out how sad and miserable their lives really were in comparison to everything going on in the outside world. Kenny told Levi that the one thing helping them move forward was getting this new goal, which was something that made life worth living. At this moment, let me just mention that within their little confrontation, Kenny actually survived this shotgun blast from Levi to the chest. It's kind of unclear how he survived this in the manga. However, in the anime version, he actually has a steel plating on his chest. Anyway, eventually Kenny succeeded in his mission of retrieving Eren and Historia. They tied up Eren to his kinky Titan dungeon, and then Kenny was supposed to get out of there. However, Kenny secretly stayed behind. He was really just listening in on the whole Rod conversation to Eren. From this whole event, Rod actually revealed that this Titan power could only be used by someone from his family. In other words, someone from the royal bloodline. This pretty much shattered everything Kenny had worked up to. At this moment, Kenny realized achieving his dream was impossible. Kenny had been patiently waiting just to turn himself into a Titan, then take the power for himself. At this point, Kenny was completely against the idea of just living out his life and dying of old age. It almost seemed like at this point he didn't care anymore. Perhaps he just wanted to see the world burn. Kenny just wanted either Historia or Eren to become this new ruler, and then see what happened from there. However, the actual Titan transformation that resulted pretty much fatally wounded Kenny. In Kenny's final moments, he seemed to have more or less realized part of what he was searching for. Everyone that Kenny ever encountered was drunk on something that kept them going. Whether this was drinking, companionship, believing in some wall god, someone's family, the king, one's dreams, one's children, or straight out power. Kenny realized how every single person was slave to one thing or another. At least Kenny seemed to have found what he was searching for his entire life in his final moments. And that concludes Kenny Ackerman. He was definitely one of the more interesting characters in the Attack on Titan series. But anyway, let me hear from you now. Question of the day. How do you feel about Kenny overall? Do you agree that Kenny was one of the best characters in Attack on Titan so far? And will perhaps Levi go down the same dark path? Anyway, definitely give this a colossal thumbs up and subscribe. If you're new here, I put out 5+ anime videos here a week. That includes a ton of Attack on Titan content. You could expect more of these type of videos for season 3. I'm also going to be doing a lot more Attack on Titan theory videos soon. So definitely click that bell icon and I'll see you guys later.